I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Emmy winner Louie Zakarian, who just earned another nomination for his work as the makeup artist on Saturday Night Live. So, Louie, obviously, your job got harder this year because of what was going on in the world. Can you talk about what this Emmy nomination means this year for you?
Oh, I mean, this year especially is so it's every nomination's always amazing. This year especially just because of all the things we had to do to bring this show back to life after, being shut down for COVID. There were so many things we had to take into consideration. Makeup artists, we're the last ones that work with talent without any kind of masks or shields because they can't have a mask on while we're putting on their makeup. So we're the ones that are in their face without any kind of protection. So all this things we had to figure out to do to make it safe for all the makeup artists to come back, as well as the cast that are coming in, sitting in our chairs, it was huge. And to be nominated this year, especially it was so gratifying.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed Joey Mancuso the other day, the hairstylist at
Yoda,
SNL.
yeah.
Yeah, and she was just talking about the whole process of not necessarily getting to surround the cast members to like change out the wigs and all that because of obviously the protocols. It's more like, they could go up one at a time. How did that impact things on your end?
I mean, that was a huge impact. Like one of the things that gets us through is that we can put like a pit crew will just surround the talent. Every wig, makeup, wardrobe, it's all going on, and then everybody separates and the car drives down the road. We couldn't do that this year. It had to be okay. Change the wheels, change, put some gas in. It was basically, we could only do one person at a time, which really it was like doing makeup with one hand tied behind our backs. It really was difficult. And at the beginning of the season, we were told, oh, we'll take all of that into consideration. And yeah, no, we still did the same show we had to do, the same 2-minute commercial changes, commercial breaks, and still had to get them out there camera ready in the next characters every week. It was just, it was a big challenge, especially like for sometimes there's characters like Kate McKinnon will go from Rudy Giuliani into herself and still have that 2-minute commercial break to get her out of that and into herself to do a contemporary makeup on her. Yeah, needless to say, it was much more challenging this year than it has in the past.
Yeah, I could imagine. And I've seen some photos on Instagram of like the technology you've been using to get the 3D scans of all the cast members and the hosts. Can you talk about that whole process for people who don't know?
Sure. One of the things while we were shut down in COVID, I was thinking about, well, when we have a host come in or a cast member come in, we do a live cast of their face. There's probably some of them on the wall behind me. We'll do a live cast of their face, but that's a very up close and personal thing that takes about half an hour. With COVID restrictions, they wanted everything to be limited to under 10 minutes and very little, up close and personal, the less people that can be involved. So I did a bunch of research and found this great 3D scanner by Artec, the space fighter that I talked to NBC and SNL about picking up. We picked up a couple of Piopoly printers, and I didn't do a live cast this whole season. I would just scan everybody's face, and David Okoye's face back there is actually a 3D print that we 3D printed and made a dummy head for when a TV had to fall on him for one of the commercial parodies. But it was just basically, it's been one of the biggest things, the biggest changes. And it's something I think I'm going to keep going from now on. It makes life so much easier. A lot of actors don't want to sit there and have all the alginate and silicone gooped on their face. And it's a process that we can do, and I can do in 10 minutes. They're in, they're out, no mess, no fuss. And then I've got their face to do whatever we need to do. So easy.
Yeah, well, I was also going to ask, like, are there more rules and restrictions that were put in place that, for example, like the 3D scanner, things like that, other things you think might be useful for you to carry over into future seasons once, even when we hopefully like get back to some sense of normalcy?
One of the other things we did was normally makeup artists would bring in their makeup kit with them and they would work out of that makeup kit. But from day to day, like if a different makeup artist came in, they wouldn't have the same makeup that somebody else had. Because of COVID, at the beginning of the year, my team and I, we put together individual kits for each and every cast member. So we have for each cast, like for Cecily Strong, for Kate, we put together a full makeup kit for prosthetic makeup, for regular makeup, for character makeup, that just was their makeup, so it wouldn't translate to anybody else. And every week, everybody had the same makeup. So if another makeup artist came in and was covering, we had the same products. And because of COVID, there was no cross contamination. Everything was that cast member's makeup. There was no, oh, I used this on Kate yesterday, I'll use it on Cecily today. It was just theirs. So we didn't, we kept the contamination factor to a bare minimum. And I think that's one of the things we're going to try and carry over to this season as well. It was a lot more work. It was a lot more work to try and coordinate and put full makeup kits together for everybody, but it was well worth the effort.
Yeah. And naturally, with this being an election year, there were a lot of politicians that were parodied. Jim Carrey coming in and playing Joe Biden. We also see, A.D. Bryant as Ted Cruz, and obviously Kate McKinnon, as you said, doing her many impressions of politicians, mostly male. Was there any one of those that you found more difficult for whatever reason to nail down than others?
Jim as Biden was a biggie because everybody was waiting. It was also, we're coming back after being shut down from COVID, and we've got to now build full prosthetics and do test makeups and turn Jim Carrey into Joe Biden. And everybody's going to be watching. It's one of those things that it's a character that everybody wants to see. Well, what do we do to turn Jim Carrey into Biden? And it was a little nerve-wracking. And Jim was great. He was so on board with whatever we had to do. He had so many ideas of his own that he wanted to come in on, and he had stuff that he brought with him, and I built new stuff. I built him a set of dentures, some prosthetics for him, and made him bald every day, and then popped on that wig and some eyebrows, and I actually used to block out his own eyebrows to make him look more like Biden, because Biden has almost no eyebrows. But yeah, that was a pretty challenging one. And then transitioning from Jim to Alex as Joe Biden, those are some big shoes to step into for Alex, and he nailed it. He did a great job, and we did a bunch of tests with him to try and turn him into Joe Biden, and that it came together nicely in the end.
Yeah. And you did obviously have to retire Alec Baldwin as Trump this season, which he'd been doing for 4 or 5 years. With a character like that who has such a set look, how much did you end up making subtle changes to that makeup over the years?
The big changes would be, oddly enough, the hue of orange that I would paint him from week to week. Because there were times where Trump would be bright orange, and then there were some times where he wasn't quite so orange. And so that was one of the adjustments that would be a periodic adjustment. The eyebrows were a big, he would sometimes go, one year he would have crazy long, thick eyebrows, and then they would be a little more groomed and manageable. So I'd trim them down and make a new set of eyebrows for him. Yeah, that was pretty much the big adjustments on Alec as Trump. But that was another one that was, I was joking with Alec just before the election. He was like, oh, I'm never gonna have to do this again. And I was like, wait and see. That was before the first election, before he won. I was like, and when he won, Alec was like, he's like, you jinxed it.
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, another thing in talking to some of the SNL cast and crew is some of them talk about the sense of responsibility they can feel sometimes when it comes to some of the political stuff. And I'm wondering, do you also have that little voice in your head that's thinking about what happens if I go a little too over the top or too cartoonish with this makeup? Will this have any kind of impact? I mean, is that the kind of thing you're also thinking about?
I'm always thinking about that whenever I'm designing a makeup for any of the characters. One of the things I've been here for 27, 28 years now. It's been a long time. And one of the things I learned early on was that Lorne he loves to see the caricature and see the cast members still in the makeup. And so whenever I'm designing a makeup, I try and keep, like, if Alex is going to be Biden, I try and keep a little bit of Alex in there. When Kate is Giuliani, like, you see that she's Giuliani, but you still see Kate in there. Early on, I did a makeup years ago on Dean Edwards to turn him into Michael Jackson, and I did a full face thing, and it was so much covered, and it looked great, but you lost Dean in it, and it ended up getting cut for after dress rehearsal, and then I had to redesign the makeup when we brought it back the next time and toned it down, so you still saw more of Dean, and then it played and it worked. But I always have to keep it a minimal caricature, because if we lose the cast member, then it's like you can put anybody in that makeup. Why,
Yeah.
you want to still see Kate or Beck in, as Putin. You still want to see Beck in there as as Putin.
Yeah. Well, something I'm thinking of now is thinking of like Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer. And I remember the audience sort of not really knowing who that was at first, but then once the recognition hit, it was just like so satisfying.
That was another one that like bit me in the rear end, because when Melissa first came into the room and when I'm talking to her about it, I was like, oh, I told her it shouldn't be that complicated. I'm not going to go too crazy. In my mind, I was saying, because I can't go that crazy, not that it's easy to turn Melissa McCarthy into Spicer, but it was more of, I can't do that much because I've got to be able to do this in a few minutes. Like, I don't try and do a makeup that's going to take more than 20 minutes or 20 minutes on any of my cast members, because we never know where it's going to be. And when I did that on Melissa, I kind of shot myself in the foot, because I wasn't thinking of 6 months down the line when she's going to host the show and still be Sean Spicer. So when she hosted the show, I think we had 2.5 minutes to turn her into Sean Spicer. Actually, it was 5 minutes in total, but the sketch before, she was getting hit in the face with shaving cream pies. So we had to clean her up, get her dressed, and basically 2.5 minutes, Amy Tagliamonte, who runs the host track, and myself had to put her into Sean Spicer while she's dry heaving because she was just swallowing all this shaving cream the sketch before. So it's always a challenge. And she was another one that was a trooper, and she was great to work with. Knock on wood, I've been very lucky that I've been fortunate to work with amazing talent that's
absolutely
so willing to deal with all the craziness that I do today.
Yeah. I want to talk about your episode submission for this year. It's the episode where Elon Musk hosted. Why did that episode feel like the right one to sort of represent your work for this season?
There was a lot of contemporary makeups we did in that one, and that's what we were nominated for, is for the contemporary makeups. But there were so many contemporary looks. We went from Gen Xers to Elon as himself, as like NASA people, and all the moms were in that episode. So we had every cast member's mother. So we had all these great contemporary makeups we had to do for that episode. And I felt out of the whole season, that was the strongest of our contemporary makeup work that we could have submitted. And it was a fun show. And Elon, he came, he had a good time. He was good to work with. It was an interesting show to do. And it was a fun one. And like I said, I've been here for a long time, and I still get a kick out of doing the show. It's still, every week is always a fun week.
Well, also in that episode, I want to dive into the Baby Yoda construction. I mean, I know he actually first did he's right there.
Right there.
But Kyle Mooney did that on the previous season, I believe. But I'm so curious about all the different elements involved with the makeup and the hair and the costumes and what materials to use. Like, how does that all come together?
Well, that all, like, when they first came to me, when like, okay, we're gonna turn Kyle into Baby Yoda, I was like, all right, well, okay, we'll figure how we're gonna turn him into Baby Yoda. And so I started doing some Photoshop renders. I like to do some Photoshop renders of what things are gonna look like before I start. So like on Wednesday night after the table read, I'll come back down here to the lab and do some Photoshop renders and try and figure it out. And once they're approved by Steve Higgins and whoever wrote it and Kyle, I'll take his head cast and start sculpting out of clay on top of that head cast, trying to get the feel of what the look is going to be. Once that's sculpted, then we'll make resin molds of that, and then clean all the clay out and it gets filled with silicone and polyfoam. So it's lightweight, but still moves and blends onto the skin. when we did it the first time, there was 3 makeup artists doing that makeup on Kyle to get him into Baby Yoda. This last time, because of COVID, just me. So it was just one person, and like you trying to do that whole big thing, hold that big headpiece on and glue it down, and still trying to get it done in the time that is allotted. So luckily I knew the paint scheme. I was able to pre-paint it 90% of the way and then just get the rest of it painted on his head. It was, thank goodness it wasn't the first time we were doing it. I kind of had a feel for what I was going into it. If I had to do it the first time, it would have really been nerve-wracking. Because usually the first time we get to see it is the dress rehearsal. So we'll find out on Wednesday night, and then the first time I actually apply it is Wednesday dress rehearsal at 7:00. So there's not much time to tweak it and change anything if it doesn't work.
Right. Wow. Well, as you were saying earlier, you've been on this show for quite a while now, since the 90s. You've seen a lot of different eras of the show. A lot of people come and go. And I was wondering if you could think back on some of those shows. Was there one that you just feel like you'll never forget because it just felt like sort of everything went right? It all came together, this like sort of magical moment situation?
There's a lot of those. I mean, there have been quite a few. I mean, wow. Trying to think about it now. I'm like,
or if there's one on the flip side where it just was like catastrophic and you'll never forget it.
Well, there's catastrophic that I'll never forget, and I don't want to even go into it. Okay. It had to be it was trying to do a makeup change originally it was a commercial break, and then from the commercial break it went to 2.5 minutes to 30 seconds to try and do something that takes half an hour. And it just was not going to work, and it still haunts me in the back of my head. I don't even want to go into it. But there was times where things have gone perfectly right. When Awkwafina hosted and Cecily Strong had to go from she started out as Cleopatra with no makeup, and then they cut back to her 30 seconds later, and she's got full Cleopatra makeup on. And when Steve Higgins was like, "Oh, you could do that, right, in 30 seconds?" I'm like, that's a big makeup to do in 30 seconds. I designed this like template on Cecily's life cast that we sculpted, and it was basically like a big makeup stamp. It was sort of like in Fifth Element when they hold up the thing and pull it away and they're fully made up. That's what gave me the idea. And I think I posted a video of it online of me popping in, pressing it on her face, stepping away, and she's got full Cleopatra. It worked so well at dress rehearsal with 30 seconds that Steve is like, "Oh man, that was so great. You had so much time. We're going to cut this. We're going to cut this. We're going to cut this. You got 10 seconds now." I'm like, what do you mean?
Wow.
I was like, 30 seconds was cutting it. He's like, "Oh, you got this." He's like, it's okay. We're going to cut it all out. I'm like, but everything lined up and it all worked out well. And that was a fun moment. Yeah. That was one that I won't forget.
Well, I could talk to you all day, Louie. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and head to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Louie, congrats again on the nomination, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I always had a blast.
Yes.
Take care.